In today's video, I'll be showing you how to boost in the Halls of Stone on a prod Paladin. This boost has been popularized by mages and is proven to be a very good alternative to questing. The experience gains for my alt when I was doing this for myself were around 200,000 experience per run using 2 heirlooms, which means that we can boost someone sitting at the portal for around 800,000 experience per hour, and that calculation was done at 4 lockouts per hour. The best part about this is that the boosting prices for Halls of Stone are currently 600 gold per run. This means 2,400 gold an hour just in boosting gold. This doesn't even take into account the 100 or more gold we'll get per run from the loot. So this is potentially the best gold maker right now in Wrath Classic, assuming you're charging something similar to what the mages are charging. So now let me show you how I'm doing it on a prod Paladin. If you have any questions about this run or you want to discuss it further, make sure to join up in the Discord linked down below. Here is the spec and the glyphs that I was using when I came in here. This is actually an exact copy from my Draktharian Keep boost. Nothing has changed at all as far as the spec goes. That's why I'm also using Glyph of Holy Wrath here. This is not going to be useful in Halls of Stone, so you can change the third glyph over to whatever you want. But everything else is exactly the same, and it's pretty standard as far as farming goes. Here's the gear that I was using when I was making this video. I just want to go over a few different things here, starting with my weapon. I did pick up the Horseman's Baleful Blade from the Hollow's End event. It's actually a pretty good DPS sword, and my damage actually really went up changing over from the Red Sword of Courage, because the damage range on this weapon is much higher than the Red Sword of Courage, so that really increases our melee damage. So it's actually a pretty decent pickup for doing stuff like this where you're fighting large amounts of mobs and you need to do big melee damage on certain targets. So pick one of these up if you can. Otherwise, if you can't, maybe look for another DPS sword that isn't the Red Sword of Courage, because while it is a great defensive sword, it's not amazing as far as offense goes. Secondly, I want to talk about Levanthar's Talisman. This is an absolutely amazing defensive trinket with a offensive / defensive on use, so it's a very nice trinket to have. I recommend that you do Heroic Violet Hold every single day to try and pick one of these up, because this trinket alone accounts for, I believe, around 4% of my total avoidance, and it all goes straight into block, and block is actually looking really nice. I'm sitting at 1659 block value currently, and when we judge with this Libram, it goes up to around 2000. So we can take really big hits without taking any damage. When we pop Holy Shield, we have well over 100% avoidance. So it's actually very nice to reach that over 100% with Holy Shield. And even when we don't have Holy Shield, Redoubt comes into play. So we're really getting into those higher avoidance levels, which I really like to see. It kind of reminds me of TBC. The third thing I want to talk about is Darkmoon card greatness. Everyone knows this is an amazing trinket, but I got a lot of comments saying, oh, you know, this trinket is way too expensive, blah, I can't afford it, so I can't do this. But in order to counter that point, I actually ran this with only one trinket equipped. So this entire video, I filmed it with no Darkmoon card greatness. I only had Levanthar's Talisman on, which is a perfectly obtainable trinket, and this is all the gear I was using. My second trinket slot had nothing in it. As you'll see, I pull it up in my character sheet during the video, so don't worry if you don't have Darkmoon card greatness. It is not a requirement. It is just a recommendation. It is a big DPS increase. So if you can get your hands on one, great, and if you can't, then don't really worry about it. It's not a big deal. So to start this run off, we're going to pull the first group of dwarves as well as the 2 constructs here, and we're going to nuke these targets down, starting with the Darkrune Thurgis. These are the mobs that cast lightning bolt at you over and over, and that nature damage can really stack up pretty quickly, so you want to make sure to nuke those targets down as fast as possible. The Darkrune Warriors are not really a threat. They don't do anything at all, so don't worry about them too much, but the Unrelenting Constructs, you'll see these throughout the dungeon. They do have a stun ability as well as a charge and a self-destruct that they do at low HP. The great thing about the self-destruct is even if it kills the mob, then the boosties will still get full experience for the kill, so you don't actually have to kill them all the way down to 0. You can actually just run away from their self-destruct and then they will die on their own and you get full credit for it, so it's actually pretty nice. But the Thurgis do have this lightning bolt ability and they just spam it on you from range and it gets very annoying, so they're going to be probably the biggest problem in the dungeon, so make sure you kill them first. For this first pull, you're going to want to use Seal of Command, and you'll notice I'm also using a good amount of consumes because we're making so much money in this dungeon that it's actually worth it to go ahead and spend money on those consumes to kind of speed your runs up a bit. So I'm using Flask of Endless Rage, which is the attack power flask. It's only about 6 gold on my server, as well as some strength food, and I also had a strength scroll in my bags that I just threw on, but I don't recommend buying scrolls. It's not really that big of a deal. For the next pull, we're going to grab 2 groups of dwarves and either 1 or 2 of these giants. The giants are not really important. What's important here is that we get at least 2 groups of dwarves and kill them. This is because in the next pull after this one, we're actually going to use rocket boots and pull the remainder of this circle. And if we left these dwarves alive, it'd be just too much lightning bolt damage on us and we wouldn't be able to handle it. So it's important to get a couple of these groups down so that the next one is more bearable and much easier. In this circle, you're going to notice a new mob type called the Elementalist. These guys have a haste buff that they will apply and cast lightning bolt at you, as well as summon the little wind spirit guys who are also going to lightning bolt you. So they're also a priority target, although they're not as important as the Theurgist, because the Theurgist actually does more damage with their lightning bolt. So it's important to kill those first, then the Elementalists, and then whatever's left over after that. These little cracks in the middle of this circle make great LOS locations, and you can stand in here and not have to worry about being smacked from behind. So I do recommend that you use these small crevices and back your character in. That way you're not getting hit from far away. If you do plan on looting while you're selling this boost, I highly recommend that you get used to looting during combat. These giants are not going to die quickly, and we're going to drag them into the next pull. So if you want the loot, you have to pick it up now before we move on. There's not really going to be a chance for you to come back and grab it, and if you do that, then you're probably going to be wasting valuable time that you're going to be making on the boost. So it's more important, I would say, to go for time than it is to go for loot. If you find yourself with extra time at the end, then you can come back for the loot. But other than that, try and pick it up on your way. That way you don't have to spend too much time backtracking. So you'll see what I did there was I killed all the dwarves. The giant was still alive, but I knew it was time to move on because killing them takes way too long. So we came out, rocket booted around the remainder of the circle, pulled everything else, and then went directly back into one of these cracks. For this one, I typically swap over to Seal of Light because we do have a generous amount of mobs here. These giants do hit hard, and if your block value is not too high, then you might take a good amount of melee damage here. So swap over to Seal of Light, make sure you're keeping your Sacred Shield up. This is also a very good time to pop your Levanthor's Talisman if you're wearing one for that extra block value, and make sure to target the Theurgist first because they're going to be lightning bolting you, and you're going to have a lot of stuff going on here. For the most part, as long as you are pressing your buttons on cooldown and you're always judging light and hitting with Hammer of the Righteous on multiple targets with your Seal of Light, this pull is going to go just fine. Just remember, you also have a reduced cooldown on your lay on hands, so you can use it once per run. Very useful. Make sure to also keep up your Sacred Shield at all times. It's very important. And if you really need to, you can bubble and heal back up as well. Jumping right into the next pull here, we wasted absolutely no time there. Once I noticed all of the Elementalists and the Theurgists were dead, we moved directly onto the next one. We pulled the warriors and the giants with us because they're just going to increase our damage and they're not really a threat to us. So it's better to just keep on going and try and get our time as low as possible to maximize the amount of gold we're making from the boost. I only pulled into the very first group here as I want to get these 2 ranged mobs down first, the Theurgist and the Elementalist, and then we'll move on again. After any spellcasters are dead, we're going to move into the northern hallway and pull the padding giant as well as the 2 constructs in here. At this point, we're going to be reaching the limit of the range that we can grant experience to the portal. So after we've got these mobs pulled, we're actually going to bring them back towards the top of the stairs to come into this northern hallway. And I feel like that's a pretty good area for killing these things. I haven't tested the exact range you can get experience from in here, but it's somewhere around here. So if you notice that your boosty is not getting all the experience that they should, then it's probably right here. As long as you're killing things around these stairs, kind of in this general vicinity, you'll be just fine. Just watch out for the kinds of constructs you have. The raging constructs do high melee damage. The unrelenting constructs, as we talked about earlier, have a stun and a self-destruct, and I believe the last one is called a lightning construct or something of that nature, and they just have a bunch of lightning spells. Unrelenting constructs should be your #1 priority before moving on to the lightning constructs, and then finally ending with the raging constructs. This pull is the acceptable time to actually kill these mobs and drop combat and do whatever you need to do before we move on to the next pull, which is going to be more up the northern hallway. The damage in the next pull is pretty high, so we don't want to drag any extra mobs into it. Just kill everything you have here before you move on. For this next pull, we're going to be pulling all of the remaining mobs on the northern side of the dungeon, which I believe is in total 7 constructs. So it's a really high damage pull. If you find that you're having trouble with this, you can try slowing it down or maybe just drop the number of mobs that you pull here by 1 or 2. But to maximize the experience gain, we're just going to pull everything all at once. Start by grabbing the 2 mobs on the right side of this outside area, and then we're going to run down the hallway and pull the 3 patrolling robots that go around the little lightning thing. Then we're going to rocket boot back down the hallway and pull the remaining 2 constructs while also kind of making a quick stop over at Bran to pick him up for some extra damage. He'll just kind of follow follow you and smack the robots. I don't think he does very much, if anything at all, but it's kind of funny to hear him like smacking the mobs around, and then he dies at the end because he can't take all the AoE damage, so it's kind of funny. But for a little bit of extra DPS, I think you can add Bran into the mix. Again, we're going to be pulling this entire thing back down to where we were before. That way we make sure that we're in the experience range of the portal. Halls of Stone is an excellent boost because it requires literally zero effort on the boosty part. They just have to zone in every 15 minutes. I mean, you can't really get much better than that. For this pull, I primarily will be using Seal of Light for the first part of it, and then once I've got a few mobs down and I know that I can handle the damage, I'll swap over to Seal of Command and go from there. Make sure to watch out for that self-destruct damage from the unrelenting constructs that you will be killing first. You can't interrupt the casts from the lightning constructs, but you can do Hammer of Justice on them to stop a cast. So if you have a free global and you want to prevent some damage, then you can throw it on one of those guys. This pull generally takes the longest out of any of the pulls because these mobs have so much HP and there's so many of them. A lot of times you'll get down to like 2 or 3 mobs and they'll be half HP. So what I like to do during this part is just kind of target whatever has the most HP once you get those unrelenting constructs down, and just kind of try and whittle them all down at the same rate. That way at the end you're not left with 1 or 2 with super high HP values. On this next pull, I actually made a mistake and I pulled on accident without getting full health and mana. I think I was just completely zoning out and wanted to move on. But what you should do is get full health and mana and then pull all 3 of these groups and LOS around a corner to group them up. What I did instead here was start with not full health and mana, and then I was kind of hesitant because I realized I messed up, and then I only pulled 2, and yeah, it was kind of a mess and it wasn't as fast as it could have been. But generally what you want to do is pull all 3 of these together. So you can either do it like me, all weird with half HP, or you can do it the right way with full HP and pull all of them. These are the same exact types of dwarves from earlier, so the same rules apply. Just make sure if you grab all of them, you're using Seal of Light because it is a good amount of dwarves and there's a lot of spellcasters here. If you did it like I did, then you'll want to kill the casters and then bring the warriors into the next group. If you did it like you're supposed to with all 3 groups, then you just want to kill the entire group before you move on. This next pull, we're going to grab the patrolling giant and the 2 constructs at the end of the hallway and then turn around and bring them back to the southern part of the dungeon where we're going to complete the boost. Make sure you save your rocket boots because we will be using that for the next room. Once you get into this southern part of the dungeon, pull everything into the first group of dwarves and then taunt the rocks on the right. We're going to have a big cluster of things to kill here, and we're going to have lots of damage coming in. So if you need to swap over to Seal of Light here as well, then that is not a bad idea. For this part, you can swap over to Shadow Resistance Aura because the chiseling ray that these guys do is actually shadow damage. But it's not too big of a deal because when you do any sort of damage to them while they're channeling this, they will actually stop channeling it. So you want to make sure to keep Consecration rolling at all times. That way the ticks will stop them from doing more damage to you. You're going to want to try and get the majority of this group down so that we don't have to bring it into the next pull. However, I did leave 1 construct up because I noticed he just had too much health and it was going to take me way too much time to try and kill him. So I brought 1 construct with me into the next pull, which is not a big deal. What you're going to want to do now is rocket boots all the way through the next area and basically just pull the remainder of the dungeon, and then we'll use bubble to stop all of the chiseling rays and ranged attacks, and then everything will group up on you in one location. This is actually a pretty big pull and there's going to be a lot of damage coming out, so we're going to be using Seal of Light once again. Make sure to keep up your Sacred Shield, yada yada yada. Same thing as always. Try and kill this construct if you left it up, and then move on to the dwarves right after. Periodically throughout this run I was using Serenite Bombs. I believe I only used a few of them though. I wasn't using them on cooldown, but if you're an engineer and you're looking for some free damage, these things are dirt cheap and you can cast them instantly. You don't have to really worry about anything. Just kind of throw them on cooldown. I think they only have like a minute cooldown or something crazy like that. So it's a great way to add a little bit of extra damage into your AoE farming. So check them out on your server. If they're super cheap to make or buy, then just go ahead and grab some. It's just free damage. You might as well have them in your bags. After you've got this pulled down, you've successfully killed every available mob within Halls of Stone, and there's nothing left to do but go out and reset. From what I've seen on my druid, I was consistently getting around 200,000 experience with 2 heirlooms equipped. As far as pricing goes, I recommend you try and sell this for 600 gold for solo boosting, 300 gold for duo boosting, and 200 gold for trio boosting. Other than that, that's really going to be about it for today's video. Like I said, if you do have any questions, comments, concerns, please join the Discord and drop a message in there. We got a great community of friendly gold farmers who are just waiting to take your call. So hop on in, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.